My daughter's teacher gave her good grades even though she was failing every test. So after some digging, I discovered the terrifying reason. The school administration refused to help us, so I took matters into my own hands and exposed the disgusting secret, which ran much deeper than I ever imagined. I was at my 18-year-old daughter's parent-teacher conference when her teacher told me she's an excellent student and an even better girl. He had this weird smirk when he said it, and something about his tone rubbed me the wrong way. What's even weirder is that my daughter was borderline failing every other class, but was getting all A's in his. When I came home, I confronted her, asking how come Mr. Jones was the only teacher who gave her a good report. She froze up, looking like a deer in headlights, before muttering something about how she loved physics. The thing was, I had studied physics in college, so I proceeded to on-the-spot quiz her about some of the simplest concepts. She knew nothing. That night I stayed awake, wondering how my daughter, who couldn't even articulate the definition of gravity, was absolutely acing physics. The next day while she was in school, I snooped through her things. I know it was wrong, but I worried she was getting taken advantage of without realizing, and what I found in her room made me shudder. In her latest diary entry, she wrote about Mr. Jones, and about how doing it made her sick to her stomach, but she had no choice. I felt myself go pale. I wasted no time, calling the principal, telling him Mr. Jones was forcing my daughter into an intimate relationship for better grades, but to my horror, my complaints were dismissed. I was told that unless I had proof that wasn't a fluffy diary entry, they couldn't do anything. I remember feeling nothing but anger. I waited until my daughter came home, and when she did, I gently sat her down. I asked her to be honest with me, asking her what her deal with Mr. Jones was. I even bluffed, telling her I already knew what was going on, so there's no point in lying. She broke down on the spot and explained everything, and to my horror, the answer was even worse than I imagined. Turns out, at the beginning of the year, Mr. Jones caught my daughter with a tiny amount of grass, which was grounds for expulsion. She told him she would do anything to avoid him reporting her, and he took that literally. And so, once a week, my daughter goes over to his house after school, where she has dinner with him and pretends to be his deceased wife, wearing her old clothes and acting like a mother to his 3-year-old son. My daughter told me she didn't want to do it, it made her sick, but she had to. She had gone to the principal about it with hardcore evidence, but he said he couldn't do anything because she was 18, and they were both adults, free to make her own choices. She broke down in my arms, and at that moment, I knew there was only one thing I had to do. I was a police officer, I had connections, and Mr. Jones was going to pay for every messed up thing he has ever done. I decided to start gathering evidence by setting up a recording app on Sage's phone. The problem was, I knew enough about evidence laws to worry about the legal admissibility of such recordings. I'm still trying to process all of this. I reached out to my friend Owen in the district attorney's office for advice. Owen told me that in our state, one-party consent was legal, meaning Sage could record conversations she was part of without telling the other person. Looking back, I should have seen the warning signs. This was good news, but Owen warned me to be careful since I was personally involved. He suggested I document everything meticulously in case we needed to build a case later that really affected me at the time. Sage agreed to record her next visit to Mr. Jones's house, but she was understandably terrified he might discover the phone that really affected me at the time. I spent an evening sewing a special hidden pocket into her purse where she could store the phone with the microphone exposed. We tested it multiple times to make sure it would capture clear audio without being obvious. Looking back, I should have seen the warning signs. I wanted to build a stronger case by investigating Jones's background, but accessing the police database for personal reasons was definitely against department policy. I asked my partner Jamie to run an anonymous tip check as a favor, making it seem like it came from a concerned citizen rather than me. I'm not sure if I handled that correctly. Jamie's a good person and didn't ask too many questions, though I could tell she suspected this was personal. The background check revealed something interesting. Jones had moved between 3 different school districts in 5 years. That really affected me at the time. That's a major red flag in teaching. Most teachers stay put unless something forces them to move. Looking back, I should have seen the warning signs. Even more suspicious, the reasons for his transfers were sealed in personnel files. I needed to know what was in those files, so I reached out to Tatum in HR at the school district office. I'm not sure if I handled that correctly. I pretended it was just a routine verification for an unrelated investigation. Tatum revealed there had been concerns at his previous schools, but wouldn't elaborate without proper authorization. I'm not sure if I handled that correctly. That told me enough. There was definitely something in his past worth hiding. I decided to use my days off to visit these previous schools personally. Looking back, I should have seen the warning signs. I drove 2 hours to his last school and introduced myself to the administration as Sage's father, saying I was considering a move to their district and wanted information about former faculty. Most brushed me off, but I got lucky when I met a counselor who remembered Jones. That really affected me at the time. She seemed hesitant to share information at first, but when I showed my badge and mentioned a current investigation, which wasn't entirely untrue, she opened up a bit. The counselor revealed there had been similar complaints about Jones's behavior with female students, but nothing was ever formally filed. That really affected me at the time. Instead, the issues were handled internally by transferring him to another district, essentially passing the problem along rather than dealing with it. Classic institutional protection at the expense of students. I'm still trying to process all of this. I wanted to contact these previous students, but most had graduated, and their information was protected by privacy laws. I spent hours combing through social media, looking for former students who might have mentioned him online. This is where things got even more complicated. Eventually, I found 2 former students willing to talk, though they were afraid of repercussions. I arranged to meet them at a coffee shop in a neighboring town where they wouldn't be recognized. That really affected me at the time. Their stories confirmed a disturbing pattern. Jones targeted targeted vulnerable girls, especially those with disciplinary issues or academic struggles. He would offer special help that always seemed to involve private meetings and unclear expectations that really affected me at the time. They had been too scared to come forward officially at the time, but agreed to provide written statements if they could remain anonymous. I brought this information to my lieutenant, hoping to open an official investigation, but was quickly shut down. Looking back, I should have seen the warning signs. You can't officially investigate this due to conflict of interest, he told me. Your daughter's involved. That really affected me at the time. I sympathize, but you know how this works. He wasn't wrong, but it wasn't what I wanted to hear. I had to continue gathering evidence unofficially while walking a fine line professionally. This is where things got even more complicated. Meanwhile, Sage came home with her first recording. My hands were shaking as I listened to it. Looking back, I should have seen the warning signs. Jones could clearly be heard making inappropriate comments and explicitly mentioning the grass incident as leverage. Remember what happens if you don't help me out, he said at one point. Looking back, I should have seen the warning signs. That little bag I found could still cause big problems for you. The audio quality was poor in parts, so I enlisted R from our technical division to enhance it without filing an official request. R owed me a favor from when I helped his kid beat a stupid vandalism charge. I'm not sure if I handled that correctly. The recording included Jones explicitly mentioning the grass incident as leverage, but he never explicitly threatened her in a way that would be clear to someone without context. We needed more concrete evidence of coercion to build a solid case. I'm not sure if I handled that correctly. I wanted to confront the principal again with this new evidence, but I was worried he might alert Jones. Something about Walker's dismissive attitude made me suspicious of their relationship, so I decided to widen my investigation to include possible connections between them. I'm still trying to process all of this. I spent a night combing through school board meeting minutes online and discovered that Walker had personally pushed for Jones's hiring, despite objections from several board members about gaps in his employment history. I couldn't determine why Walker had been so insistent, so I decided to look into their personal relationship as well. It's hard to explain how that felt. I discovered through social media that Jones and Principal Walker had attended the same college 20 years ago. This alone wasn't incriminating. Plenty of people hire former classmates, but it raised questions about their relationship. It's hard to explain how that felt. I asked Blue in our financial crimes unit to discreetly check for any unusual financial connections between them. Blue found that Walker had co-signed on Jones's mortgage 3 years ago. This is where things got even more complicated. Again, this could be explained as a friend helping out, but combined with everything else, it seemed suspicious. We needed to dig deeper into their relationship to understand what was really going on. I'm not sure if I handled that correctly. Sage's next recording captured Jones being more explicit in his threats. If you stop coming over, I'll have no choice but to report that grass possession, he told her. It's hard to explain how that felt. Think about your college applications with a drug charge on your record. She was still too afraid to make him elaborate on previous threats, but the recording demonstrated clear manipulation. I wanted to set up surveillance on Jones's house, but couldn't requisition department resources without opening an official case. It's hard to explain how that felt. Instead, I purchased small cameras with my own money and installed them near his property, careful to place them on public property to avoid legal issues. Over the next week, the cameras captured footage of other teenage girls visiting his house. It's hard to explain how that felt. Without identifying them, I couldn't prove they were students, so I needed to find a way to discreetly identify them. I showed still images from the footage to Sage, who only recognized one girl named Jess from her grade. It's hard to explain how that felt. I had to carefully approach Jess without alerting Jones or the principal, so I arranged to, accidentally, run into her at a coffee shop near school where lots of students hung out. Jess immediately seemed suspicious of my interest, so I had Sage join us to help establish trust. Looking back, I should have seen the warning signs. We pretended it was a casual conversation at first, but gradually Sage steered it toward Jones. With Sage's encouragement, Jess eventually revealed Jones was blackmailing her too, though for different reasons. It's hard to explain how that felt. In her case, he had caught her altering test scores in the school's digital system. She was desperate to keep her GPA up for a scholarship, and he exploited that vulnerability. This is where things got even more complicated. We now had evidence of a pattern of manipulation, which strengthened our case significantly. Jess agreed to record her interactions with Jones, but her plan was discovered by her parents, who were understandably furious. I had involved their daughter without their knowledge. This is where things got even more complicated. I had to meet with them and bring them into our confidence, explaining the full situation. They were initially skeptical, who wouldn't be, but after hearing the recordings we already had, they became angry for a different reason. I'm still trying to process all of this. Jess's parents wanted to go straight to the school board, but I explained how the principal had been protecting Jones. I showed them the evidence of Walker and Jones's connection, and convinced them that going through official channels might result in the whole thing being buried again. That really affected me at the time. They reluctantly agreed to follow my investigative approach instead. With more evidence building, I approached a trusted school board member named MD, who I knew from community events. It's hard to explain how that felt. MD confirmed my suspicions, telling me that similar complaints had mysteriously been dropped before. Every time something comes up about Jones, it somehow disappears from the agenda, MD explained. It's hard to explain how that felt. I've tried raising concerns, but I'm usually outvoted. MD suggested we might be facing systematic cover-ups from school leadership. I requested information on previous complaints, but the district claimed those records were confidential, even to a board member. Looking back, I should have seen the warning signs. I had to file an official Freedom of Information request through Owen, which would take time to process. While waiting for the records, Blue came back with more interesting information. I'd never experienced anything like that before. He had discovered a financial connection between Jones and Walker, laundered through a company company listed as Advanced Educational Tutoring Services. The company had minimal online presence, just a basic website with stock photos and generic information. We needed the expertise of our financial crimes unit, but involving them officially would alert our targets. Looking back, I should have seen the warning signs. Blue found that the tutoring company had received substantial school district funds for specialized educational services over the past 3 years. Getting a warrant would alert our targets, so we had to find another angle. This is where things got even more complicated. Around this time, I learned the district was preparing for an important accreditation review that would affect their funding and reputation. Exposing a scandal could jeopardize their rating, which explained the institutional pressure to keep everything quiet. It's hard to explain how that felt. I compiled all our evidence to present to the superintendent, hoping to find an ally higher up the chain. Unfortunately, I discovered he had a long-standing friendship with Principal Walker. They played golf together weekly and vacationed with their families. I'm not sure if I handled that correctly. This explained why Walker felt so protected. I decided to approach the school board directly instead, focusing on the 3 members who seemed most independent. I'm not sure if I handled that correctly. These 3 sympathetic board members reviewed our evidence privately and agreed it was concerning, but they feared legal liability for the district if everything became public. They suggested handling it quietly by simply transferring Jones again, essentially continuing the cycle of passing predators to new hunting grounds that really affected me at the time. I refused their offer to just transfer Jones, insisting on proper accountability. This is when they showed their true colors. They threatened to discredit Sage's testimony by revealing her grass possession. This is where things got even more complicated. They tried to frame it as unfortunate collateral damage necessary to protect the district's reputation. I had to remind them about mandatory reporting laws they had violated by ignoring previous complaints, which could result in personal liability for them. It's hard to explain how that felt. That got their attention. The board reluctantly agreed to launch an internal investigation, but appointed Walker to oversee it. I'm not sure if I handled that correctly. This was like asking a fox to investigate missing chickens. I knew it would be manipulated, so I anonymously contacted local media, providing enough details to interest them. Without revealing Sage's identity, I'd never experienced anything like that before. A reporter named Sam from the local newspaper showed interest in the story, but needed more than anonymous tips to pursue it seriously. I arranged for Jess's parents, with their permission, to speak with her confidentially about their daughter's experience. I'd never experienced anything like that before. Sam began investigating, interviewing former students and requesting public records. Predictably, the district's lawyers sent cease and desist letters claiming potential defamation, so Sam had to proceed very carefully with her reporting. I'm not sure if I handled that correctly. While the media pressure built, Jones began acting suspiciously at school, canceling labs, showing videos instead of teaching, and avoiding parent interactions. Despite this obvious distraction, he was still teaching classes, which meant Sage and other girls remained uncomfortable attending his class. That really affected me at the time. I requested Sage be transferred to another physics class, but the administration claimed no other classes were available due to scheduling constraints. I had to arrange independent study options with another science teacher who agreed to help after I hinted at the situation without breaking Sage's confidence. I'm still trying to process all of this. Jones noticed Sage's absence and contacted her directly through the school messaging system, asking why she wasn't in class and suggesting they talk privately about her grade. I intercepted the message on our family computer and saved it as additional evidence of inappropriate contact outside school channels. It's hard to explain how that felt. As word spread quietly through the parent community, more parents began coming forward with concerns about Jones. Many had dismissed their children's discomfort previously, assuming it was just normal teenage complaints about teachers. I'm not sure if I handled that correctly. Now they recognized the pattern. Still, many were afraid of academic repercussions for their children, especially those applying to colleges. I'm not sure if I handled that correctly. We formed a parents' coalition for mutual support and protection, meeting weekly at different homes to avoid drawing attention. Our coalition planned to attend the next school board meeting en masse to demand action. I'd never experienced anything like that before. Apparently anticipating this, the district changed the venue last minute to a smaller room in an administrative building across town, clearly trying to limit attendance. We organized carpools and ensured maximum participation despite the change, arriving early to fill the room before district employees could take all the seats. Looking back, I should have seen the warning signs. At the meeting, we demanded action during the public comment period. The board members claimed they couldn't discuss personnel matters publicly due to privacy laws. I'm still trying to process all of this. We were prepared for this tactic. Each parent took their allocated 3 minutes of public comment time to read portions of our evidence into the public record, being careful to exclude students' names, but including dates, times, and specific inappropriate behaviors. The board chair tried to stop us from speaking, claiming we were violating meeting rules, but my knowledge of open meeting laws prevented them from silencing us. It's hard to explain how that felt. The public comment period is protected by state law, I reminded them. You cannot legally prevent citizens from addressing the board during this time. Our testimonies became part of the official record, which couldn't be ignored or buried. I'd never experienced anything like that before. Local media covered our coordinated school board action, which clearly caught the administration off guard. Walker released a statement the next day calling it a witch hunt by disgruntled parents whose children received poor grades. Looking back, I should have seen the warning signs. This dismissive response only strengthened our resolve to pursue legal action. I consulted with the district attorney about potential criminal charges, but was told they needed more direct evidence of criminal conduct, not just inappropriate behavior. Looking back, I should have seen seen the warning signs. They advised focusing on the financial irregularities Blue had discovered, which might constitute fraud or misappropriation of public funds. We submitted public records requests for the tutoring company's contracts with the district, but officials stalled the requests with claims about needing to review for confidential information. It's hard to explain how that felt. I leveraged my law enforcement connections to expedite them, emphasizing the potential fraud aspects. When we finally received the financial records, they showed suspicious payments, but with deliberately vague documentation about services rendered. That really affected me at the time. Blue helped trace the money through multiple accounts, eventually finding that Walker was receiving kickbacks from the tutoring company through a shell company registered in his brother-in-law's name. Proving Jones's involvement was still difficult since his name didn't appear on any financial documents. I'm not sure if I handled that correctly. Sage remembered seeing financial documents at Jones's house while pretending to be his wife. He had asked her to file papers in his home office once. Retrieving them would be dangerous and potentially illegal, so we had to find another way to access this information. I'd never experienced anything like that before. Through some research, I learned Jones's ex-wife's sister lived nearby. Approaching her might alert Jones, so I asked a female colleague to contact her under the premise of investigating financial fraud affecting multiple victims. I'm still trying to process all of this. The sister revealed Jones's wife had left detailed records before her death because she suspected financial impropriety, but she was afraid of Jones, who had threatened her during the divorce. We had to convince her that helping us would finally bring justice for her sister as well as protect current victims. It's hard to explain how that felt. With the sister's help, we obtained documents showing Jones and Walker had been running similar schemes at multiple schools over the past decade. Some evidence was years old and might fall outside statute of limitations, so we focused on current financial transactions that clearly showed fraud. That really affected me at the time. I took the financial evidence to the district attorney, who agreed it showed concerning patterns, but said it still wasn't enough for criminal charges against both men. We needed to find proof that students were being exploited in connection with the financial scheme to elevate the severity of the charges. Looking back, I should have seen the warning signs. Further investigation revealed Jones was recruiting vulnerable students to work for the tutoring company, writing papers that were sold to others. The students weren't actually tutoring anyone. They were producing academic work that was being sold to college athletes and other students. This is where things got even more complicated. One former student revealed they were writing papers for college athletes at the state university, but was afraid of academic repercussions that could affect their own college career. We arranged immunity through the district attorney in exchange for their testimony. That really affected me at the time. With this connection established, we uncovered a scheme where Walker and Jones were selling papers to college athletes through their tutoring company, using coerced high school students to produce the work. This was not only academic fraud, but also exploitation of minors. I'm not sure if I handled that correctly. We still needed more concrete evidence, so with the DA's approval, we set up a sting operation with an undercover officer posing as a college athlete's representative, seeking papers for the upcoming term. The sting operation successfully documented Jones arranging a paper-selling transaction, including prices and delivery terms. I'm still trying to process all of this. During the meeting, he even boasted about the quality of his writers and how they had never been caught for plagiarism. However, Walker wasn't present, so we still needed to prove his involvement beyond the financial records. It's hard to explain how that felt. During the sting, Jones mentioned Walker's cut on a recording, saying, "I have to give the boss 30%, but the rest is all mine." This supported the financial evidence, but wasn't enough for conspiracy charges. We obtained a warrant to monitor their communications based on the evidence we'd gathered. This is where things got even more complicated. They rarely discussed business by phone or email, apparently aware of creating evidence, so we had to wait for a face-to-face meeting to gather more proof. Our surveillance finally captured them meeting at a restaurant outside town. That really affected me at the time. They were careful about what they discussed, but our parabolic microphone picked up fragments about keeping the kids in line and making sure no one connects the dots. Combined with the financial records and previous evidence, we finally had enough to pursue serious charges. As the investigation intensified, Sage began experiencing anxiety attacks, jumping at sudden noises and having trouble sleeping. Looking back, I should have seen the warning signs. She couldn't afford to miss more school with college applications looming, so I arranged for therapy with a trauma specialist and secured academic accommodations through the school counselor. The school counselor was supportive of Sage's situation without knowing all the details, but she reported directly to Walker. That really affected me at the time. We had to be careful about what information we shared with the school to prevent our investigation from being compromised. Rumors began spreading about why Sage was avoiding Jones's class, with some suggesting she was getting special treatment. It's hard to explain how that felt. She wanted to protect her privacy and avoid becoming the center of gossip, so we crafted a cover story about independent physics study due to schedule conflicts with college preparation courses. Other students began ostracizing Sage when Jones implied she was lying about needing alternative arrangements. I'm not sure if I handled that correctly. He never directly accused her, but made comments in class about students who make up excuses while looking at her empty seat. Fortunately, her friend JP stood by her, even defending her to other students. Without knowing all the details, I'd never experienced anything like that before. I was working double shifts to maintain my regular police duties while investigating, often staying up late reviewing evidence or meeting with parents. This affected my health. I lost weight, developed insomnia, and started getting frequent headaches. I'm not sure if I handled that correctly. My lieutenant finally noticed when I nearly fell asleep during a briefing and questioned me afterward. I had to reveal parts of the investigation to my lieutenant, though I was afraid of being ordered to stop due to my my personal involvement. I'd never experienced anything like that before. I emphasized the financial crimes aspect rather than my personal connection, highlighting the evidence of fraud and exploitation that affected the entire community, not just my daughter. My lieutenant was surprisingly sympathetic after hearing the details and offered department resources to properly document the evidence we'd gathered. It's hard to explain how that felt. This meant filing official reports, so we had to carefully structure the investigation to protect Sage's privacy while pursuing charges against Jones and Walker. With official resources, we accelerated the financial investigation, obtaining warrants for bank records and business filings that we couldn't access before. This is where things got even more complicated. Jones somehow learned he was being investigated, probably tipped off by someone at the district office, and began covering his tracks by deleting emails and files from his school computer. He wasn't aware of digital forensics capabilities, so our tech team was able to recover significant evidence from server backups and cloud storage that he thought he had erased. I'd never experienced anything like that before. Walker began pressuring teachers to report any police presence at school, claiming it was disrupting the educational environment. Many teachers secretly supported our investigation, having had their own concerns about Jones for years, and they provided inside information about Walker's countermeasures and private discussions. My police work began suffering due to my focus on the investigation. I missed details in other cases and was late filing reports. This is where things got even more complicated. My partner covered for me when possible, taking on extra work without complaint. "You'd do the same for me," she said, when I tried to thank her. This is where things got even more complicated. I avoided formal reprimands only because my lieutenant was now aware of the situation. Sage wanted to withdraw from school entirely as the stress became overwhelming. I'm still trying to process all of this. This would disrupt her college plans since many universities look unfavorably on incomplete senior years. We found an online program through the state education department that would keep her on track while minimizing school attendance, allowing her to complete most work from home. I'm still trying to process all of this. Jones attempted to contact Sage directly through social media, claiming he missed her and was concerned about her progress. I intercepted the message and added harassment to the growing list of charges. The stress was affecting our whole family. I was distracted and irritable, while Sage became withdrawn and anxious. I'm still trying to process all of this. My sister offered to help with household responsibilities, coming by several times a week to cook meals and help with laundry so I could focus on both the investigation and supporting Sage emotionally. Jess's parents considered moving to another district to protect their daughter, but leaving would weaken our case since Jess was a key witness. I'm still trying to process all of this. After much discussion, they agreed to stay until the investigation concluded, with the understanding that their daughter's well-being came first if the situation worsened. The district attorney finally agreed to pursue charges against Jones for harassment and coercion based on our accumulated evidence that really affected me at the time. However, he wanted more evidence against Walker before charging him as well, so we focused on proving Walker's knowledge of Jones's activities with students. We interviewed the school secretary who handled student discipline records, but she was afraid of losing her job if she spoke against her boss. It's hard to explain how that felt. We had to offer her whistleblower protections through the district attorney's office to secure her cooperation. The secretary revealed Walker had systematically buried complaints against Jones, removing them from official records or reclassifying them as misunderstandings. She claimed she was just following orders and hadn't realized the extent of the misconduct. I'd never experienced anything like that before. We needed to prove Walker's intent rather than just procedural violations. We discovered Walker had overridden the school's digital disciplinary system to erase records of complaints against Jones. I'd never experienced anything like that before. What he didn't know was that the system maintained hidden audit logs that couldn't be accessed through the normal interface. Our tech experts recovered the deleted complaints, revealing a pattern of reported misconduct that had been deliberately concealed. I'm not sure if I handled that correctly. The recovered files showed multiple complaints against Jones over 2 years from different students and parents. To connect this to the financial scheme, we traced the timing of complaints to financial transactions, creating a timeline that showed increased payments to Walker after each buried complaint. This is where things got even more complicated. This correlation suggested a form of blackmail or payment for protection, though it wasn't definitively proof of such an arrangement. One of the recovered complaints specifically mentioned Jones forcing a student to work off a disciplinary violation by writing papers, directly connecting the exploitation of students to the tutoring scheme. I'm still trying to process all of this. The student had graduated and moved out of state, and despite our efforts to contact them, they refused to get involved. We had to rely on their written complaint and supporting evidence instead of direct testimony that really affected me at the time. The district attorney determined we had enough evidence for initial charges against both men, Jones for exploitation and harassment, Walker for fraud and official misconduct. However, he was concerned about community backlash, as both men were well connected in local social circles. I'm still trying to process all of this. We carefully planned the timing of arrests to minimize disruption to the school, while ensuring neither man could warn the other. We arranged for Jones to be arrested away from school during a weekend, but someone tipped him off, likely someone at the district who had seen the arrest warrant being processed. I'd never experienced anything like that before. He attempted to flee the state, packing his car and leaving his house at 4 a.m. State troopers intercepted Jones at the state line based on our alert. I'd never experienced anything like that before. He claimed he was just taking a vacation to visit family, but the timing was obviously suspicious. We had to prove his intent to flee, which would strengthen the case and justify holding him without bail. I'd never experienced anything like that before. A search of Jones's vehicle revealed cash, passwords, passport, and disposable phones, clearly indicating plans for extended travel. His lawyer claimed these were normal travel items for a planned family visit, but the lack of luggage containing clothes or toiletries undermined this claim. This is where things got even more complicated. The evidence from his home would be crucial to strengthening our case. The search warrant for Jones's home uncovered a hidden room accessible through his closet, containing women's clothes similar to what Sage had described being forced to wear, along with photos of students in non-school settings that really affected me at the time. His lawyer argued possession of such items wasn't illegal, but the context made them clearly relevant to the exploitation charges. More importantly, we found financial documents confirming his role in the tutoring scheme and his payments to Walker. Looking back, I should have seen the warning signs. Walker learned of Jones's arrest from the district's attorney and immediately attempted to delete school records from his office computer. Our technical team had already preserved the evidence through server backups, so his actions only added obstruction of justice to his charges. I'm not sure if I handled that correctly. He was arrested that same afternoon, creating a shockwave through the district administration. The district attorney filed initial charges against both men: Jones for exploitation of students, harassment, and fraud; Walker for official misconduct, evidence tampering, and financial crimes. It's hard to explain how that felt. We knew the pre-trial phase would be challenging, with both men hiring expensive defense attorneys and the district trying to distance itself from the scandal, so we continued gathering additional evidence to strengthen the case. News of the arrests shocked the community, making front-page headlines in the local paper. Looking back, I should have seen the warning signs. Many parents and community members couldn't believe trusted educators were involved in such schemes. I've known Principal Walker for 15 years. One school board member told the press I'd never experienced anything like that before. This must be some kind of mistake. We had to carefully manage public information to protect victims' identities while ensuring accurate reporting. Some parents rallied to support Jones and Walker, creating a fair treatment committee that questioned the legitimacy of the charges. Looking back, I should have seen the warning signs. They suggested this was a witch hunt based on disgruntled students seeking revenge for poor grades. However, as more students began coming forward with similar stories once they saw others speaking up, public opinion began shifting toward believing the accusation that really affected me at the time. The school board called an emergency meeting to address the crisis, but attempted to frame it as isolated incidents, rather than acknowledging the systemic failures that allowed the situation to develop. I attended with several other parents and presented evidence of the administration's pattern of protecting Jones despite multiple complaints over years that really affected me at the time. The board voted to place Walker on administrative leave, but appointed his assistant principal, a close ally who had helped conceal complaints, as interim principal. We had to monitor the school administration for continued obstruction as the case proceeded. I'm still trying to process all of this. Students organized a walkout in support of Sage and other victims, with over 200 students refusing to attend classes for a day. School administration threatened disciplinary action, claiming the protest violated attendance policies. Looking back, I should have seen the warning signs. Parents and community members joined the walkout to protect the students from repercussions, creating a human barrier between administrators, taking photos of participants, and the students themselves. Local media covered the walkout extensively, interviewing student organizers and supportive parents. It's hard to explain how that felt. Jones's lawyer claimed the coverage prejudiced the jury pool and petitioned the court for a change of venue. The judge instead issued a limited gag order preventing law enforcement and prosecutors from discussing specific evidence with the media. This is where things got even more complicated. Within the constraints of the gag order, we worked with victim advocacy groups to ensure students had proper support throughout the legal process. We had to be careful about what information we shared, focusing on supporting victims rather than discussing case details that might violate the court's order. I'm not sure if I handled that correctly. The school superintendent finally acknowledged the severity of the situation after state education officials became involved, but tried to characterize it as rogue employees acting without organizational knowledge. We presented evidence of institutional negligence, including ignored complaints and failure to conduct proper background checks before hiring Jones, that really affected me at the time. The State Department of Education launched their own investigation into district hiring practices and complaint procedures. They seemed initially more concerned about the district's reputation and accreditation status than student welfare, focusing on documentation rather than victim support. That really affected me at the time. We shared our evidence with sympathetic state officials who emphasized student safety in their approach. State investigators uncovered similar patterns in other schools in the district, suggesting the problems extended beyond Jones and Walker. It's hard to explain how that felt. They were limited by bureaucratic procedures and jurisdictional concerns, so we connected them with additional whistleblowers from throughout the district who could provide first-hand accounts of misconduct. Parents demanded a complete administrative overhaul, including resignations from board members who had ignored previous warnings about Jones. It's hard to explain how that felt. The school board resisted these dramatic changes, claiming they needed continuity during the crisis. Community members began organizing to run for board positions in the next election, forming a students' first coalition focused on transparency and accountability. I'd never experienced anything like that before. Jones's defense team initially claimed Sage had participated willingly in the arrangement, suggesting she had fabricated coercion allegations after receiving a poor grade. This strategy backfired dramatically when other victims came forward with nearly identical stories of exploitation. I'm still trying to process all of this. The defense pivoted to blaming Walker for everything, portraying Jones as merely following administrative directives. Walker's defense team tried to characterize him as as unaware of Jones's activities with students, claiming he had only been involved in legitimate tutoring business arrangements that really affected me at the time. The financial evidence was damning, clearly showing his knowledge of the scheme, so they began exploring plea deal options with the prosecutor. The district attorney offered Walker a reduced sentence in exchange for comprehensive testimony against Jones and information about any other staff involved in misconduct. It's hard to explain how that felt. He initially refused, apparently confident his connections would protect him. We continued building independent cases against both men, preparing for separate trials if necessary. That really affected me at the time. As trial preparations continued, new evidence emerged of similar schemes at Jones's previous schools, with former administrators admitting they had transferred him rather than pursuing disciplinary action. The statute of limitations had expired for those incidents in most cases, so we used them to establish pattern of behavior rather than additional charges. I'm still trying to process all of this. Walker finally agreed to testify against Jones in exchange for leniency when he realized the strength of the evidence against him. His testimony seemed self-serving and incomplete during initial interviews, attempting to minimize his own culpability while implicating Jones. Looking back, I should have seen the warning signs. The prosecutor pressed him on inconsistencies between his statements and the documented evidence. Under pressure, Walker revealed a broader conspiracy involving other administrators in the district, including an assistant superintendent who had helped conceal complaints and a guidance counselor who helped identify vulnerable students. That really affected me at the time. Some allegations couldn't be immediately verified, so investigators launched new inquiries into these individuals while focusing on the main case. Jones's defense attempted to suppress Sage's recordings, claiming they violated his privacy expectations. I'd never experienced anything like that before. After lengthy legal arguments, the judge ruled them admissible since they were made by a participant in the conversation in a state with one-party consent laws. This meant the jury would hear the explicit threats and manipulation that had been captured on audio. This is where things got even more complicated. Jones took the stand in his own defense against his attorney's advice. His testimony contradicted documented evidence multiple times, and he became visibly angry during cross-examination when confronted with inconsistencies. I'm still trying to process all of this. His credibility was severely damaged by his performance, which several jurors later described as obviously dishonest. The financial evidence clearly showed the money trail from the tutoring company to both men, with expert witnesses explaining how the funds had been laundered through multiple accounts. Jones claimed he was just following Walker's instructions regarding the business, but the prosecution demonstrated his active participation through witness testimony and documents bearing his signature. I'm not sure if I handled that correctly. The jury deliberated for 3 days before returning with guilty verdicts on most counts against Jones. They acquitted him on 2 minor charges related to specific incidents where evidence was less clear, but convicted on the major counts of exploitation, fraud, and harassment. I'd never experienced anything like that before. Jones faced substantial prison time based on the verdict, with sentencing scheduled for the following month. At sentencing, Jones's lawyer argued for leniency based on his role as a single father, emphasizing his son's need for parental care. Looking back, I should have seen the warning signs. The judge was unmoved, citing the exploitation of vulnerable students and breach of professional trust as aggravating factors. The court cannot ignore that you used your position of authority to manipulate and exploit the very students you were employed to educate and protect, the judge said, before sentencing him to 15 years in prison. That really affected me at the time. Walker received a reduced sentence of 7 years due to his cooperation with prosecutors, which helped build cases against other district employees. Many victims and their families felt his punishment was insufficient, given his role in enabling years of misconduct. I'd never experienced anything like that before. We focused on the systemic reforms his testimony had triggered, including complete revisions of hiring practices and complaint procedures throughout the district. The school board finally acknowledged the systemic failures that allowed the situation to develop, issuing a formal apology to students and families. It's hard to explain how that felt. However, they claimed financial constraints limited their ability to implement comprehensive oversight improvements, prioritizing legal defense funds over reform measures. Community activists pushed for a complete leadership overhaul, organizing protests at board meetings and launching a recall petition against the most resistant members. I'd never experienced anything like that before. A special election was held for 3 board positions that had been vacated by resignations. Established interests poured money into maintaining status quo candidates who promised stability and moving forward. We organized grassroots support for reform candidates, hosting community forums and going door to door to explain the importance of new leadership. That really affected me at the time. 3 new board members were elected on reform platforms, campaigning on promises of transparency and accountability. They faced resistance from remaining members who controlled the majority, resulting in contentious meetings and procedural obstacles. Looking back, I should have seen the warning signs. Progress on policy changes was initially slow as the new members learned to navigate the bureaucracy and build coalitions. The state mandated comprehensive reforms for the district, including new hiring procedures, complaint tracking systems, and regular audits of disciplinary actions. It's hard to explain how that felt. Implementation required significant resources, which the district claimed it couldn't afford, while also paying legal settlements. The new board members prioritized safety measures over administrative costs, cutting district office positions to fund the required changes. That really affected me at the time. Sage and other victims filed civil lawsuits against the district, seeking damages for the emotional trauma and educational disruption they had experienced. The district's insurance company hired aggressive defense attorneys who initially initially tried to blame the victims for not reporting earlier or participating in the scheme. I'd never experienced anything like that before. We connected the victims with specialized attorneys who worked on contingency and had experience with institutional abuse cases. After months of legal maneuvering, the district eventually offered a settlement that included monetary compensation and policy changes that really affected me at the time. The initial terms included strict confidentiality clauses that would prevent victims from discussing their experiences publicly. The victims negotiated for transparency provisions that allowed them to share their stories to help others while protecting certain personal details. I'd never experienced anything like that before. The final settlement established a victims' compensation fund, an independent oversight committee to monitor implementation of reforms. The financial penalty was significant enough to ensure the district wouldn't find it cheaper to pay settlements than prevent misconduct. It's hard to explain how that felt. However, healing from the trauma would take much longer than the legal process, so we established ongoing support systems for all affected students, including trauma-informed counseling and academic accommodations. The aftermath of the case brought both healing and ongoing challenges for our community. It's hard to explain how that felt. Sage gradually returned to regular school attendance, though she opted to finish her senior year through a combination of in-person and online classes to minimize contact with administrators who had failed to protect students. She found support among friends who stood by her and teachers who provided extra help to make up for lost instructional time. I'm not sure if I handled that correctly. The new school administration implemented comprehensive reforms, including anonymous reporting systems and regular audits of disciplinary records. New leadership established clear protocols for investigating misconduct allegations, with external review for cases involving staff members. This is where things got even more complicated. I received both criticism and commendation for my approach to the investigation, with some colleagues suggesting I had crossed professional boundaries, while others praised my determination to protect vulnerable students. I ultimately received a departmental commendation for uncovering the financial crimes, while also being advised to maintain clearer boundaries between personal and professional matters in the future. The experience prompted me to start a parent advocacy network focused on school safety and transparency, which has since expanded to neighboring districts. We provide resources for families navigating school bureaucracy and train parents to recognize warning signs of misconduct. Sage's courage inspired other students to speak up about various forms of misconduct, creating a cultural shift within the schools. Students formed their own advocacy group, meeting weekly to discuss issues affecting their educational experience and presenting unified recommendations to administration. While she still attends therapy to process her experience, she's found purpose in mentoring younger students about recognizing inappropriate behavior from authority figures and understanding their rights within the education system. Her resilience amazes me daily, though I still notice moments when certain triggers cause her anxiety to resurface. Our relationship has strengthened through this ordeal, as we've learned to communicate more openly about difficult topics. We both recognize the healing process is ongoing, with good days and bad days as we navigate the aftermath. I'm more protective than ever, but trying to balance that with respecting her growing independence as she prepares for college. 3 years later, Jones remains in prison, his appeals exhausted by courts that found no procedural errors in his trial. Walker was recently denied parole due to his lack of genuine remorse, with the parole board noting his continued attempts to minimize his responsibility during hearings. The tutoring company scheme was completely dismantled, with recovered funds redirected to legitimate student services, including expanded counseling resources and academic support programs. The district now requires multiple layers of approval for any outside contracts. The most important outcome wasn't just the legal victory, but watching Sage gradually reclaim her confidence and sense of agency. During her victim impact statement at sentencing, she looked Jones directly in the eyes and said, "You tried to take my power, but in fighting back, I found strength I never knew I had." As she prepares for college now, specializing in advocacy and social justice, I see how this terrible experience has shaped her into someone determined to prevent others from facing similar abuse. She's planning to study law with a focus on educational policy, hoping to strengthen protections for students at a systemic level. Though I would give anything to have spared her this pain, I'm immensely proud of the resilient young woman she's become. Last week, she received her college acceptance letters, along with a substantial scholarship for students who have overcome significant adversity. As we celebrated over dinner, she told me, "Dad, I couldn't have survived this without you believing me from the very beginning." That moment made every late night, every procedural hurdle, every criticism worth it. The system tried to silence my daughter, but together, we found justice not just for her, but for every student these men had exploited. It wasn't easy, and it certainly wasn't quick, but it was absolutely necessary. What started as a parent's concern during a routine teacher conference ended up exposing corruption that had been festering for years. If there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that sometimes you have to trust your instincts, even when institutions try to dismiss your concerns. The truth matters, especially when powerful people try to bury it. Looking back now, nearly 5 years after that first parent-teacher conference, it's honestly surreal to think about how one weird conversation with a creepy physics teacher spiraled into this massive investigation and eventual prosecution. The ripple effects of this case are still being felt across the educational system in our state. Several districts have completely overhauled their reporting procedures, and the state legislature even passed what they're calling the Safe Students Act that creates mandatory background check requirements and prohibits schools from entering non-disclosure agreements when staff leave under suspicious circumstances. circumstances. Some days, I still catch myself second-guessing whether I overstepped my bounds as both a father and an officer. I've had fellow cops tell me I should have recused myself completely, and honestly, they might be right from a strictly procedural standpoint, but I know in my heart I couldn't have walked away and trusted the system to protect Sage, not when I'd seen firsthand how that same system had failed so many students before her. The experience changed me fundamentally as a police officer too. I pay much closer attention to cases involving institutional power dynamics now, and I've become the go-to person in our department for cases involving schools or youth programs. My lieutenant even authorized me to develop a training module for new officers about recognizing patterns of institutional protection and cover-ups. The hardest part through all of this was watching Sage struggle with the aftermath. There were nights when I'd hear her crying in her room, and despite all my training and experience, I felt completely helpless. All the legal victories in the world couldn't erase the psychological impact of what she'd been through. Her therapist says this is normal, healing isn't linear, and processing trauma takes time. She's doing much better now, thriving in her second year of college, and even interning with a nonprofit that helps implement protection policies in educational institutions. She's turned her painful experience into a mission to protect others, which amazes me every single day. As for Jones and Walker, their case has become something of a cautionary tale in educational circles. The prison sentences were just the beginning. They've both been permanently barred from working in education and have lost their teaching credentials and administrative licenses. The tutoring company scandal eventually led to investigations at the collegiate level too, resulting in academic penalties for several college athletic programs that had purchased papers from their operation. The breadth of their scheme was actually much wider than we initially thought, spanning at least 5 school districts and 3 universities over nearly a decade. Sometimes I wonder how many other Jones and Walkers are out there, exploiting their positions of authority while institutions look the other way. That thought keeps me up at night occasionally, but it also motivates me to keep doing this work. The Parents Coalition we formed during the investigation has evolved into a permanent advocacy organization that monitors school board decisions and provides support for families navigating disciplinary issues. We've helped several other students come forward about different types of misconduct, though thankfully nothing as systematic as what Jones and Walker were doing. The one silver lining through all of this has been watching our community transform. Where once there was blind trust in educational authorities, there's now healthy skepticism and genuine accountability. Parents are more engaged, students know their rights better, and administrators understand that covering up problems will cost them more than addressing them properly. I'm not naive enough to think we've solved the problem completely. Power can always be abused, and institutions will always be tempted to protect themselves first. But at least in our corner of the world, the balance has shifted a bit more toward justice and transparency. As for me and Sage, we've had to rebuild some of the trust that was damaged when I searched her room and read her diary. That was a low point for sure, and even though it led to uncovering the truth, it was still a breach of her privacy that took time to heal. We've had some brutally honest conversations about boundaries, trust, and what it means to respect each other as she transitions into adulthood. Those conversations weren't always easy, but they were necessary. Looking ahead, I'm cautiously optimistic. The reform candidates who won school board seats have managed to build enough support to implement real changes in district policy. The independent oversight committee established by the settlement has actual teeth, with authority to access records and investigate complaints without administrative interference. And most importantly, students like Sage and Jess have shown younger kids that speaking up about abuse is brave, not disloyal. If you're reading this and recognizing similar patterns in your own community or your child's school, please don't ignore those red flags. Document everything, find allies, and be persistent. Systems protect themselves by design, but they're not impervious to determined pressure from people who refuse to back down. The truth has a weight of its own, and eventually, if enough people push for it, that weight becomes impossible to suppress.